The morning sky over York was still grey when Eleanor Davies opened her front door to collect the post. The street was silent, damp from the night's drizzle, and the cold bit at her cheeks. Among the usual bills and catalogues, there was one envelope that stood out. It was cream-coloured, sealed with a dark red wax stamp, and bore no return address. Her name was written in elegant, slanted handwriting, the sort one might see on letters from another century. She closed the door, her curiosity stirring. Sitting at the small oak table by her kitchen window, she broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of thick paper. The words were written in black ink, the letters flowing like water. Eleanor Davies. I owe you the truth. Meet me at Whitby Pier before the last light falls. You deserve to know what was taken from you. There was no signature. No hint of the sender's identity. A faint unease settled in her chest. Eleanor taught art at a secondary school and was used to harmless pranks from her pupils, but this felt different, deliberate, almost urgent. She glanced at the date on the calendar. Today was Friday. She had no plans for the weekend, and Whitby was only a 2-hour drive away. The words, "What was taken from you," echoed in her mind. What could that possibly mean? She reached for her phone, ready to call her closest friend for advice, but stopped. For reasons she could not explain, she did not want anyone else to know. By midday, her small car was rolling north through the moorland roads. Low clouds hung heavy over the landscape, and the wind carried the faint scent of the sea. The closer she drew to Whitby, the stronger the feeling that she was stepping into something that could not be undone. When she finally saw the sea, grey and restless under the afternoon sky, she felt a strange pull, like the waves themselves were waiting for her. And there, in the distance, the silhouette of the pier cut through the mist. What she did not notice was the dark figure standing at the far end, watching her approach. The wind at Whitby Pier was sharp, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Eleanor pulled her coat tighter and stepped onto the wooden boards, which creaked faintly beneath her boots. The waves crashed against the stone walls below, their rhythm steady yet threatening. She walked slowly, scanning the faces of the few people scattered along the pier. Most were tourists with cameras, couples wrapped in scarves, or fishermen tending to their nets. But at the far end, leaning against the railing, was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, dressed in a dark overcoat, his hands buried deep in the pockets. His face was partly hidden beneath the shadow of a flat cap. When Eleanor's eyes met his, he did not smile, only nodded, as if to confirm she was the one he had been waiting for. She hesitated, the sound of the wind growing louder in her ears. Something in his stillness felt deliberate, calculated. "You came," he said when she reached him. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the sea. "I got your letter," Eleanor replied. For a moment, the man looked at her as though weighing whether to speak. "I shouldn't be here. But you need to know, there is a painting. It belongs to you. It always did. And they've hidden it for 30 years. Eleanor frowned. "I don't understand. Who are you?" Instead of answering, he took a small envelope from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Go to this address tomorrow. Alone. If they know you're coming, the painting will disappear forever." She glanced down at the envelope. It was unmarked except for a street name in Whitby she didn't recognize. When she looked up again, the man was already walking away, blending into the crowd. Eleanor called out, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. The waves crashed harder against the pier, and a thin rain began to fall. In her pocket, the envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it carried not just an address, but the first step into a secret she might wish she'd never uncovered. The next morning, the rain had eased, leaving Whitby under a blanket of mist. Eleanor parked her car near the harbour and followed the narrow streets until she reached Carrick Lane. The address on the envelope led her to a row of Victorian houses, their stone walls damp from years of sea spray. Number 17 stood at the far end, slightly apart from the others. Its paint was peeling, the windows clouded with dust. A rusted gate squealed as she pushed it open. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time, and the door creaked open under her hand. The air inside was heavy with the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic. "Hello," she called out, stepping into the dim hallway. Her eyes adjusted to the gloom. Faded wallpaper curled at the corners, and a tall clock in the corner ticked softly, though the time on its face was wrong. She moved further in, drawn by the faint light spilling from a room at the back. It was a study. Bookshelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of thick volumes. On the desk lay a stack of yellowed letters tied with ribbon. Beside them stood a silver frame, its glass cracked, holding a photograph of a young woman with striking dark eyes. Eleanor froze. The woman in the picture looked almost exactly like her. Before she could make sense of it, a floorboard groaned behind her. She spun around. A figure stood in the doorway, a woman in her late 50s, with sharp cheekbones and hair streaked with grey. Her eyes were fixed on Eleanor, wide with shock. "You shouldn't be here," the woman said, her voice trembling. "If they know you've found this place, they'll come for you too." Eleanor's heart thudded in her chest. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. The woman stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. "My name is Margaret Hensley," she said. "And you look exactly like someone I knew a long time ago." Eleanor's gaze shifted to the cracked photograph on the desk. "The woman in the picture?" Margaret nodded, her eyes not leaving Eleanor's face. "Her name was Celeste Whitmore. She disappeared in 1993. No body was found. No one was ever charged. But the painting..." She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she had already said too much. "The man who sent me here," Eleanor pressed, "he said the painting belongs to me." "Why?" Margaret's lips trembled. "Because Celeste was your mother." The words hit Eleanor like a sudden gust of wind. "That's impossible. My mother was Helen Davies. She died when I was 7. Margaret moved closer, her voice low. "Helen raised you, yes. But she wasn't the one who gave birth to you. Celeste was. And before she vanished, she left behind a painting, your portrait as a child. Someone has kept it hidden all these years. If you find it, you'll find out what really happened to her." The air in the room felt colder. Outside, the mist thickened, blurring the view from the window. Eleanor tried to steady her breathing. "And who exactly is they?" Margaret's eyes darted to the door. "People who would rather the truth stayed buried. People who've already killed once." A noise from the hallway made them both turn. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoed against the wooden floor, growing louder. Margaret's expression hardened. "They've found you," she whispered. The footsteps drew closer, each one deliberate, heavy enough to make the old floorboards groan. Eleanor's pulse raced. Margaret stepped in front of her, her hand tightening around Eleanor's wrist. "Listen to me," Margaret said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a back door through the kitchen. Go now. Don't stop, and don't look back." The shadow of a figure appeared in the hallway, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with unhurried precision. Eleanor caught the gleam of something metallic in his hand before Margaret shoved her towards the narrow doorway. She stumbled into the kitchen, the smell of damp wood and rust filling her nose. The back door was locked, a thick bolt holding it shut. Her hands shook as she tried to slide it free, the sound of footsteps now entering the study behind her. "Eleanor!" Margaret's voice rang out, urgent, followed by a muffled thud, as though something, or someone, had struck the floor. The bolt came free at last. Eleanor flung the door open and was met with a blast of cold air. The small garden beyond was overgrown, the path choked with weeds, but she ran anyway, her boots slipping on the wet ground. The mist outside was thicker now, swallowing sound and shape. She could hear her own breathing, ragged and fast, and somewhere behind her, the crunch of footsteps following. She reached the gate at the back of the garden and pushed it open, spilling out into a narrow alley. The fog wrapped around her like a shroud, and for a moment she thought she had lost him. Then, faint but certain, came a man's voice from the mist. "You can't hide from the truth, Eleanor." Eleanor froze. The mist swirled in front of her, and a tall shape emerged, this time not the same heavy-shouldered man from the house, but someone else entirely. He was younger, perhaps in his 30s, with a narrow face and a scarf wound tightly at his neck. His eyes, sharp and watchful, flicked past her to the garden gate she had just come through. "Keep moving," he said under his breath, stepping beside her. "If you stop, he'll find you." Eleanor hesitated. "Who are you?" "Not here," he replied. "Follow me." He set off at a brisk pace through the alley, weaving between shadows. Eleanor followed, the sound of distant footsteps fading behind them. After several turns, they emerged onto a quiet cobbled street. The fog was thinner here, and a single street lamp cast a pale glow over the worn stones. The man stopped in front of a narrow doorway. "Inside," he urged, unlocking it with a small brass key. Eleanor stepped in, finding herself in a cramped flat that smelled faintly of coffee and turpentine. The walls were lined with canvases, some blank, others covered with rough sketches in charcoal. He locked the door behind them. "My name's Daniel Rowe. I'm a restorer at the Whitby Museum. 3 days ago, someone broke into our storage and tried to take a painting they had no right to. I think it's the same one you're looking for." Eleanor's breath caught. "The portrait?" Daniel nodded. "I saw it once, years ago. A little girl with dark eyes, standing by the sea. It looked unsettlingly like you." He moved to a small desk and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I managed to photograph it before they locked it away. You need to see this." As he spread the photograph across the desk, Eleanor felt her chest tighten. The child in the painting was indeed her, same eyes, same tilt of the chin. But behind the figure, faintly painted into the stormy sky, was the outline of a second face. Watching. The cold morning mist still clung to the fields when Eliza returned to the study. The room felt heavier than before, as if it had absorbed every whisper and suspicion from the night before. She had barely crossed the threshold when her boot caught on a loose plank near the far corner. She knelt, her fingers brushing over the wood. The plank lifted with surprising ease, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside lay a single folded slip of paper, browned with age, its edges brittle. She hesitated before opening it, almost afraid of what might be written. The handwriting was hurried, the ink blotched as though the writer had been trembling. "If they find this, it will be the end of me. Tell no one. Burn this after reading." Beneath the warning was a single name, scrawled with such force the pen had torn the page, Henry Ashcombe. Eliza's heart pounded. That name belonged to a man who had supposedly died decades ago, the previous owner of the manor, rumored to have vanished under mysterious circumstances. A floorboard creaked behind her. She froze. "Looking for something, Miss Eliza?" A voice murmured, low, deliberate, and far too close. She turned, but the doorway was empty. The paper trembled in her grip as she realized that whoever had spoken had been inside the room, and was now gone. The days that followed were filled with a strange stillness. Michael's questions about my behavior grew more frequent, but I dodged them with half-truths, feigning fatigue or claiming work preoccupied me. One evening, while he was at a late meeting, I decided to tidy the study. It had always been his domain, with its polished oak desk and tall bookcases, but that night, I felt a gnawing urge to go through it. Perhaps I was looking for reassurance or confirmation. The bottom drawer stuck slightly before giving way with a reluctant creak. Inside, beneath a stack of bank statements and an unopened packet of fountain pen cartridges, lay a thick cream envelope. My name was written across it in Michael's handwriting, though something about the way he had pressed the pen felt heavy. I hesitated, my breath caught between my ribs. The envelope was sealed, yet slightly frayed at one corner as though it had been handled too many times. My fingers worked at the flap until it tore open with a soft rip. Inside was a letter, dated 3 months ago. If you are reading this, Evelyn, it means the truth is no longer mine to hold. The words blurred for a moment as my pulse pounded in my ears. I never intended to deceive you, but some secrets have teeth, and once they are set loose, they bite everyone in their path. The letter went on, but my eyes kept snagging on one line halfway down the page. They will come for you too, once they realize you know. A faint sound from the hall snapped my head up, the click of the front door. Michael was home early. I shoved the letter back into the envelope, crammed it into my cardigan pocket, and closed the drawer with shaking hands. When Michael stepped into the study doorway, his eyes swept the room before settling on me. "Find anything interesting?" he asked, his voice soft but too measured, like a man who already knew the answer. I forced a smile. "Just dust." But my heart was pounding so loudly, I feared he might hear it. What I didn't know then was that the letter was only the first piece of a far darker puzzle, and that someone else already knew I had found it.